not a single fan of any of those 4 teams who lives in those cities owns a winter jacket. And this is Canada's game, and these are the final 4 teams playing. Like,
you're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah!
Good evening and welcome to episode 171 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Just Cody and Melbourne, 2 out of the 3 for this one. Abrams is unavailable for this episode, but that's okay. We'll keep things rolling along. Chad, how we doing, man?
Doing well. No deck cast for Casey today. He's building a deck. Don't know. That's all the details we got.
Yep.
He's building a deck. So we suggested a deck cast, and it was just funny. He said, obviously not. Doing well. I placed the order today for all of the Boys in the Booth Ball Hockey Tournament shirts. Boys in the Booth Ball Hockey Classic shirts. I'm trying to get that name right.
Yep.
Don't want to get fined here for saying the wrong thing on the podcast, but placed the order today. I went to Toronto Tees, got a great deal on the shirts. Relatively speaking. And the guy who helped me out, Christian, was super nice and actually really excited to work on them as well, because we have some great designs this year.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this ball hockey tournament.
Me too, man.
Like a lot.
Yeah.
And it's nice that it's happening a bit earlier too, in June. So it's like, it's going to be nice to kind of get it out of the way, because that's a great time to do it in the summer before it gets like extremely hot. And also, July is usually the best month of the summer. There's a million things going on. So to fit that into June, it's kind of nice. We're spreading out some of the best parts of the summer. So I'm very excited about that. That's what's clearly on my mind right now, because I just came from Toronto Tees. But doing well. I wish, obviously, that the Leafs were still in the playoffs, but, it is what it is. They likely weren't going to come back from 3-0. I said that last podcast. And then the Devils, too, getting eliminated here in the East. That's not something that we saw coming in 5 games. So I know we're going to get into it in this episode, but we went 1 for 4, which is a bit tough in the second round. But, I don't think many people did well in terms of predicting the second round.
No.
Because, It was kind of a wash, not going to lie.
And especially in terms of overall brackets, of course. I think the majority of people who filled them out at NHL.com did very poorly.
Yes. There's one thing that I think all of us have gotten right up until this point, and that's the Dallas Stars making their way to the Eastern Conference Final. Or the Western Conference Final, rather. If I'm remembering correctly, I think we all had Dallas going that far, and I think Casey had them going to the Cup final. Did you as well? Or no, you had Edmonton and someone else, right? Boston, maybe.
Yes, I had Edmonton and Boston, but I had Dallas in the Final Four, and you're correct, we all did, and Casey had Dallas-Boston in the final. So anyway, if we can get one of us that has them in the Stanley Cup final, and that comes to fruition, that'd be better than nothing.
Yeah, that's right. And there were a few upsets, obviously, just going back to the first round, Seattle, and then what a fight they gave Dallas in the second round, taking them all the way to Game 7 with having 0 superstars on their team, just incredible. And something you sent me earlier today that I thought we should mention too is now there's not a single player in the Final Four who makes over $10 million. There are 3 players who make exactly $10 million, but not a single guy who makes more than that. So the streak continues in that regard. A $10 million player, I don't think, has won the Cup ever. You could fact check me on that. But every time this gets brought up, I have to mention that in terms of percentage of the cap, plenty of players who have made an equivalent of $10 million relative to their percentage of the cap, whatever the cap was at that time, plenty of players have won the Cup making over $10 million.
That's
right. And it's actually more than 50% when you just go back like 20 years. So I believe Data Driven Hockey on Instagram had a post about this, and that's where I got the information, and I trust that account. I trust that guy. So I always have to bring that to the conversation when that gets mentioned.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent an excellent point, excuse me. And looking at the team that we just mentioned there a minute ago, the Dallas Stars, if you, because when we look at player salaries and stuff, we just look at like the cap hit on Cap Friendly. So Tyler Seguin, for example, is actually the highest paid player in the NHL this year. When you factor in bonuses and all of that, it's actually around $13 million that he's making this year. But that AAV that we see, I believe, is 9.85 or something like that. So
yeah, and that's just the structure of his specific contract, backloaded for whatever reason. Most guys now, they front load it like crazy, and then they have access to that money. They can invest it.
Gets cheaper as you go, and yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
It's seemingly like that is the more prudent financial decision, especially when it's that much money and someone else is handling your money for you. That's what people suggest.
Yeah.
But regardless, this is all to say, that $10 million stat, now there's not a single player who makes over $10 million in the playoffs in the Final Four. I just have to give a bit of nuance to that, because I don't think it's quite fair to say that, despite the fact that it is technically true.
Yes, that's right. And, as the cap continues to go up, I mean, it's not going to go up by much this coming summer, but the following summer, so summer of 2025, I guess, it's going to go up even more and continue to go up and up from there. And I mean, we are going to see players on teams winning Stanley Cups with over $10 million as an AAV. I mean, that's just the way it's going, for sure. And another interesting note, 3 of the Final 4 teams are in no tax states in the U.S., which is really interesting, because obviously the narrative out there being that, Canadian teams have to pay their players more to stick around with the tax brackets and, just the pressure and all of that. Whereas,
and also teams in New York and LA,
yes,
or California as a whole, those 3 teams out there, like the narrative is there. And this was okay, like, not that we're going to get into this whole capology stuff, but I remember back when the Leafs guys signed their deals, Marner in particular, when he signed for 893 or whatever it is. I believe that's the number. And people were saying, and people still say, that was an overpay. But when you look, I mean, especially compared to a guy like Braden Point, who signed prior to him, who makes, I think, like 9.5 or something.
Yeah.
But the point was, when Marner signed, you have to factor in the types of taxes that he's going to have to pay. So 9.5 in Florida, where there's no state tax, a player who makes that, as opposed to 11 in Ontario, where you're getting taxed out the wazoo, you're actually bringing home more money living in Florida, although you make a couple $1 million less. So that's right. Something to consider. And that's, I didn't even realize that, but you're right. The only thing I thought of when looking at these Final Four teams, so we've got Dallas, Vegas, Carolina,
and Florida.
And Florida, of course. So they beat Toronto.
Yeah.
Someone said, I think it was Justin Bourne on the Real Kipper and Bourne show, that not a single fan of any of those 4 teams who lives in those cities owns a winter jacket. And this is Canada's game. And these are the Final Four teams playing. Like, I would imagine that ratings for this Final Four just plummet, or will just plummet, after, Edmonton and Toronto, the 2 remaining Canadian teams, were knocked off.
Well, and that's the thing. And I mean, we're getting a little off track here, but I know personally, I'm probably going to be watching less of the playoffs from here on out because of the teams that are left. And so, yeah, but that's a great comment. Yeah, not a single one of these fans owns a winter jacket. And I mean, by the way, what a missed opportunity for the NHL on Sunday night. Connor McDavid, best player on the planet, in an elimination game in Edmonton against Vegas, and 10 o'clock start time on a Sunday night. The only game on the schedule, too. Absolutely brutal. Anyway, that is a topic for another day.
Yeah, we could have a whole conversation on stuff like that. And by the way, there were 3 goals in the first 5 minutes of that game.
Yeah.
And ESPN was playing a 9-1 baseball game that spilled into that NHL time slot. So fans wanting to watch the game on ESPN missed those first 3 goals in an elimination game with the best player to ever play hockey on the ice. Just makes absolutely no sense.
Again, we got to do a whole episode on all of this. We'll bring in a business expert and we'll have a conversation about how the NHL can better market the game and all of that. So
great idea.
Yeah, so there we go. All right, so let's quickly recap those second round playoff series, and we'll start with your Toronto Maple Leafs, who really dug themselves a hole going down 3-0 against the Florida Panthers. They they get a win to get back in it in Florida, and then they lose in overtime, which was just a heartbreaker to watch on Friday night on home ice, and they lose the series in 5 games. Florida moves on again. They continue this incredible run that they're on. I know that all 3 of us, we picked the Leafs, obviously, in this series, but Florida continues on, and it's another early offseason for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
And now, a word from our sponsors. This podcast is sponsored by Liquid IV. Whether you're staying active or nursing a hangover, Liquid IV has you covered. Just 1 stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates faster and more efficiently than water alone. It contains 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C, with 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. It's made with premium ingredients, it's non-GMO, and it's free from gluten, dairy, and soy. There are plenty of awesome flavors, but my personal favorite right now is lemon lime. So, get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code boys_in_the_booth at checkout. That's 20% off anything in the store when you order using the promo code boys_in_the_booth at liquidiv.com. Experience better hydration today with Liquid IV. This podcast is also sponsored by the best ticket app out there, SeatGeek. SeatGeek takes the confusion out of buying tickets, making it quick and easy to get the best deals on tickets to your favorite sporting events. Plus, Boys in the Booth listeners get $20 off their first ticket purchase on SeatGeek with the promo code BoysInTheBooth in all caps. So, click the link in the description down below to download the app, and remember to get your discounted tickets using the code BoysInTheBooth in all caps. Get great seats for a fraction of the cost with SeatGeek. Yeah, so I just want to start by saying that, I don't think we should spend too much time recapping these previous series, especially this one, because I plan to do an episode in the future, maybe similar to last year when I did it with John Kiriakou, our buddy, and we just talked about the ideal offseason for the Maple Leafs. So I'm hoping to do that maybe later on in the summer once we get some clarity on what's happening with the management situation in Toronto.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because we would prefer to talk about the player situation, the situation on the ice as opposed to off the ice. And I think that would be a good episode to do, and then we could break down, where it all went wrong for the Leafs in this series. But, just briefly, I'll reiterate what Sheldon Keefe said in his end-of-year presser, that, this series was lost in the first 3 games, really. You can't go down 3-0, no matter who you're playing, whether it's an 8 seed or a number 1 seed. You can't go down 3-0 to a team in the NHL and expect to win, because it's only been done 4 times in the past, and it's extremely hard to do. So even when the Leafs won Game 4, sure, it was a tightly played game, and the series is completely different if they win that game 4, if it's already, if it's 2-1 instead of 3-0, if they got one of those first 2 games in the win column where, they frankly dominated the expected goals. Anyways, I believe after 2 games, the expected goals was something like 10-5 for the Maple Leafs. So if they got one of those first 2 games and then they win game 4, this series is completely different and it's likely going the distance, but it was just too much of a mountain to climb for the Maple Leafs going down 3-0. So Sheldon Keefe was entirely correct when he said that the series was lost in the first 3 games. So again, don't have a ton to say about it. I'm sure I'll break it down in the summer, but that's what I've got right now.
Yeah, definitely. And looking forward to that when you and John kind of dissect the Maple Leafs and do that episode in the summertime for sure. So Florida moves on, and the Carolina Hurricanes move on as well. So those 2 teams will play each other in the Eastern Conference Finals. Carolina takes out the New Jersey Devils in 5 games. And, I know all 3 of us went with the Devils. That's Casey's team. Obviously, he's not here for this, but what a season for the Devils. I mean, you got to be walking away from this being like, what an awesome year. We were better than expected, took a real step forward, but we just lost to a team with so much depth. They're so well coached, and Carolina was definitely the better team in this series, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think it came down to any one thing for the Devils. Maybe Casey could, maybe he would say otherwise. But it's just a team that was, that's been there, done that, way more experienced, going against a team who, was their first time there. They don't have a ton of experience outside of a couple guys, like Andre Palat is one of them. But, even, despite the fact that these teams were relatively closely matched all season long in terms of points anyways. Maybe we should have seen this coming a little bit more when we were making our predictions, because Florida they have that next man up mentality. And that was one of the points that I made when we were talking about that series, the fact that they were missing some key guys to injury, but it really didn't matter at the end of the day. And maybe we should have seen that coming because they're so, well coached by Rod Brindamore. So Carolina is a team, I kind of like how they play it. They're able to score a bunch on you because they have the great depth throughout their lineup. But if they want to, and this is how they like to play, and I think they're most successful doing it this way, is just kind of shutting it down, just kind of turtling and really stymieing the opposition defensively, and then relying on some pretty good goaltending with, whoever's in the net, whether it be Freddie Anderson, Antti Ranta, or Pyotr Kochetkov. So I like that team, and I like their odds in the conference finals, to be honest.
And, this is kind of the first time that former Maple Leaf Freddie Anderson is in the midst of a long playoff run. And for Carolina, I think that, they have their guy in net. Finally, Anderson has broken through, and that's great. But to me, it's the blue line as well. I think they have an elite blue line, and I think the X factor for them and the real difference maker this time around has been Brent Burns, in my opinion. He had an incredible regular season, and that's carried over into the playoffs. And I think that blue line was just too much for the Devils to handle in the end. But what an exciting year for a young hockey team, and I think they're going to be in the playoffs year after year moving forward with that group that they have. So, yeah, definitely. Like I said, Florida, Carolina in the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll get to our predictions for that in a moment. But let's go to the West now, the 2 series there. So Vegas and the Edmonton Oilers. And again, we went 1-for-4 in round 2. We all had Edmonton in this series. They lose in 6 games to the Vegas Golden Knights. Adin Hill with just an outstanding performance on Sunday night. Just absolutely peppered and overwhelmed by the Edmonton Oilers, but he stood tall. Great great series for a guy like Jack Eichel, Jonathan Marchessault, the list goes on. And Vegas is back in the Final Four for the second time in the history of that franchise. So a thought on this series?
Yeah, well, so do you want to... never mind. It makes sense to go through it this way. My brain's a bit scrambly right now. But okay, so this Vegas Edmonton series, we all said that Edmonton's offense would carry them through. I think we could all agree that the defense in Vegas was objectively better, and then the goaltending was a bit of a wash because both guys on either side are kind of unproven. So, I mean, it didn't really come down to goaltending, in my opinion. Adin Hill was good, but, did he steal the series? No. I think it came down to the Oilers not being able to produce at 5-on-5, which is something that has hurt them, since they've had McDavid and Draisaitl, really. They're a team that really benefits on the power play. Obviously, they have one of the best power plays in history, maybe the best power play we've ever seen in the NHL, period. Yeah. But in the playoffs, as we know, after the first couple games, and we've seen the data to back this up, power plays go way down. We know that happens, and so maybe it's just, maybe they need to add 5-on-5 scoring. We thought they got that in Evander Kane and some other guys down the lineup, but I don't know. It's one of those things, you can only rely on your top two guys so much, and you only get so much power play time. So 5-on-5 scoring, I think, really killed them. And then, of course, Stuart Skinner being pulled multiple times and not playing as well as he has all season. I don't know if the moment got to him or fatigue, because we have to remember he wasn't the starting goalie all year long. He did split a lot of games with Jack Campbell, and he wasn't supposed to be the starting goalie, that's for sure. So maybe fatigue got to him. I don't really know exactly what happened there. I think he's a really good goalie, and going forward, I don't even mind a tandem of Campbell and Skinner, because I think they're both capable of being good, but they're also clearly both capable of not being good. But I guess that's just goaltending in general. So that was another thing for the Oilers. The goaltending, it wasn't fantastic, and that hurts when you're not able to score at 5-on-5. So the final thing I'll say about the series is that the refs, man, and the Department of Player Safety, I think both failed the Oilers here, because
absolutely
that Pietrangelo slash two-handed wood chopping slash on Leon Draisaitl, arguably the second best player on the planet, that being just one game is ridiculous. That should have been at least two. But if that's in the regular season, that might be 10. That might be that.
Yeah.
If we're talking slashes, that might be that might be it. That might be the worst slash you can do. Aside from hitting a guy in the head or in the face or something. But if we're talking slashes to the body, getting a two-hand over the shoulder hack to your wrist is insane. I could not believe he only got a game for that. And Pietrangelo is their best defenseman. And I know Nurse also got a game for instigating, for starting that fight at the end of the game. And I think that was taken into account, by the way, by player safety, which, again, is ludicrous. That should not matter.
Yeah.
That's my opinion anyway. It should be the play on the ice that happened compared to similar plays in the past as a precedent, and then go from there. But we know that the Department of Player Safety just makes it up. And, I don't think it's good enough, but that's the way it is. And I'm not saying that specific play alone lost them the series, but, I mean, if Petro's gone for the series, I would like to think that the Oilers would have been at least more productive at 5-on-5 than they were, because that's the reason they lost the series. And I'm sure they would have loved to get that extra edge of not having the best defenseman on Vegas in the lineup. So those are my thoughts on the series. You have anything to add?
Yeah, definitely. And just quickly, I agree with you. I think the lack of 5-on-5 scoring really hurt this team, because when you look at that forward group, it's McDavid and Draisaitl, and it's everybody else that is there for depth. I think Evander Kane was playing injured. He really did not have an impact in this series at all. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins really struggled as well after a 100-point season. Zach Hyman was playing hurt as well. And then other guys, Kailer Yamamoto, I think you got to think that there's a real possibility that he gets moved in the offseason with how poorly he played, and the other guys down the lineup, Derek Ryan, Bugstad, not putting it on guys like McLeod and Costin, because I think that they were good, especially Klim Costin. But yeah, just not enough depth there, 5-on-5, and going into the offseason, Edmonton doesn't need to do a lot, I don't think. I think they're close to being a cup winner. I think that this was definitely a lot to put on Stuart Skinner in his rookie season. And if I'm Jay Woodcroft, I would have given Jack Campbell the Game 6 start or so, because in his career he's got a good record against Vegas, and I think in the times that he came in relief for Skinner, he played well. Plus, you're paying the guy $5 million on a long-term deal. But I'm with you. I don't mind that tandem moving forward. I think that Skinner is for real, and he's only going to get better, and this was a great learning experience for him. And then again, we saw Evan Bouchard really pop for this team, especially on that power play. Tyson Barrie being moved out really freed him up, and so what does that next contract look like? But really not a lot of questions with this team. You run it back next year because you've got 2 more years of Leon Draisaitl and 3 more of McDavid. So time is of the essence for this team, but I think they're close. It's just disappointing that they couldn't win this series, but got to hand it to Vegas, man. They're a deep team from top to bottom, and I'm with you. The Department of Player Safety, the punishments that were handed out to Pietrangelo and Kane, and some of the missed calls and everything, absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, nothing we can do.
Yeah, not much you can do, so there's, why waste our breath talking about it?
Yeah.
But just to kind of conclude on the Oilers, I'm with you. I think they should run it back and just go for it again. But it is just a bit disappointing given the fact that they were in the Final Four last year and they had a good chance to do it again this year against a Vegas team that, I think they only finished within a few points of each other in the standings, yes. But that's a team who missed the playoffs last year. I know that they've had injuries in the past, and maybe that was a big reason why they missed the playoffs last year. But, it was a team who, we thought, frankly, Edmonton was better than, and they just weren't in this series, unfortunately. And also, too, your point about starting Jack Campbell in Game 6, I hear you. It's a tough call, though. It's a really tough call, and I don't blame Jay Woodcroft for going with Stuart Skinner in an elimination game when he's been your guy all year long. He got you there, and I get what you're saying. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of similar, not exactly, but it is kind of similar to, the Leafs starting Joe Woll over Matt Murray. Because Joe Woll was a guy who was there. He had played in those playoffs, and he looked pretty good when he did so, as opposed to playing your $5 million man in Matt Murray. And it's a similar situation to Campbell, where just because you pay the guy doesn't mean he necessarily deserves a start, just given the season that they've both had. That's right. And I didn't blame Jay Woodcroft for making that move. No, and I didn't blame him at all. I was just saying, I would look at maybe starting Campbell in Game 6, but I get it. You go with Skinner. He's been your guy, and he was the guy that got you there as the number one. So I totally get that as well. All right, and the final second round series that just wrapped up
last night, and that was the Dallas Stars and the Seattle Kraken. So the Stars get this done in 7 games. Just what a run by the Kraken. 2 7-game series in rounds 1 and 2 against 2 very good teams, and we got one. We got one right out of the 4. So the Dallas Stars are moving on, and we all had Dallas. So the Stars now look to Vegas in the Western Conference Finals. So just a quick thought on this one.
Yeah, I mean, we all picked Dallas because we thought they were the better team. And, after that series, it turns out they are. I think Seattle, kind of exposed not the lack of foot speed, but kind of used their great speed to their advantage. And they kind of just controlled games like that, just like they did in the first round against Colorado. So, it just goes to show that there are a lot of good players in the NHL. And even though Seattle doesn't have, a quote unquote superstar, they have a lot of guys who can play with pace.
They do.
And do damage. So, I heard Elliot Friedman say that the success of teams like Vegas and Seattle is really appealing to new franchises who might want to, or who the NHL might want to expand to, right? Like, because you can come in to the league and in your first year or second year in Seattle's case, like, compete, and they were good. Like they were better than everybody thought they were going to be, and credit to them, because they're only getting better in the future with their deep prospect pool, and it's only going to get deeper this year. So
absolutely,
credit to them. At the same time, though, the Dallas Stars were not surprised that they're in the Final Four. They're a deep team. They have superstars at each position, and maybe that was the difference in this series. And I'm glad that we got this one right, because this one just made a lot of sense. And as much as I wanted to bet on Seattle, I couldn't go against Dallas here.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we got one right, and yeah, I mean, we all like the Dallas Stars. We all are in agreement that they have a long window. They're built to win now and for the future. Like, Jim Nill has done an incredible job, and going back to that point that we made earlier, Chad, about there not being a single player making over $10 million in the Final Four now. Well, looking at the Stars, you've got your 3 cornerstone players your 4 cornerstone players. Roope Hintz, leading scorer in the postseason, absolutely incredible. Miro Heiskanen, Jake Ottinger, and Jason Robertson, all under $9 million in salary. I mean, Ottinger, that's especially a bargain with the deal that he's on. Just absolutely amazing. And then, you look at the depth and the way they've passed those guys. Like Wyatt Johnston, a rookie, is the one that gets the series clinching goal, the youngest player to score a series clinching goal in the last 31 years. And by the way, you brought in a new head coach who has a great record in Game 7s. Peter DeBoer is now 8-0 in his career in Game 7s. So, man, you got to hand it to Jim Nill. I think the Stars are just getting started with this long window, and they certainly deserve to be back in the Final Four. But, man, a huge credit to Dave Haxtell, Ron Francis, and the Seattle Kraken. A hell of a season, and they're going to have some pretty high expectations going into next year, I think, with that group that they have.
For sure. Like we've said a million times, that 2017 draft was the turning point for this franchise. To get your 3 cornerstone players in one draft is insane. And I was just laughing earlier because I'm dealing with the the autofocus. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I
did. trying to get my camera back in focus. But no, I'm glad that the Stars made it through, because frankly, they're the better team. And like you said, they're just getting started. So
absolutely. All right, quickly, we'll give our predictions for the Final Four now, starting with the Eastern Conference Finals. So Florida and the Carolina Hurricanes. Let's hear it.
Okay, well, do you have Casey's predictions first? Do you want to?
Yeah.
Because he's not here. He mailed them in.
Sure.
So do you want to do that first?
Yeah,
do you
we can
it
do
in front of
that.
you?
And so Casey is going with the Florida Panthers in 6 games in this series. So, an interesting pick for sure. I think that this series could go either way. And man, I mean, why not go with the team that just continues to roll right now on this incredible run that no one expected? So I totally get that as well if they can keep up this play. But, to me, I look at the back end, the difference of the back ends on these two teams. So I'm actually going to go with the Carolina Hurricanes in 7 games.
Okay, so Casey's picking Florida in 6. You're going Carolina in 7. I haven't talked to Case since, but since the Devils have been eliminated about this, but I wanted to ask him, because people have been asking me, would you rather see the team that beat your team, go all the way or lose in the next round? Like, that's the age-old debate, right? So I wonder if that's how Casey's feeling. He just wants to see Carolina get pumped because, screw them, they beat us.
I think we know him well enough that that's exactly what he's thinking.
Yeah, and so that was in the back of my mind when I read his prediction there. But I'm going to go with Carolina in 7 for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to go with you on Carolina in 7 here, just because, they're well coached. They have that next man up mentality.
Yeah.
And, I questioned last series if the injuries and the fact that they were missing some key players was going to be a problem for them. And it wasn't at all. They play such a well-structured team game that I don't think it matters if they don't have a guy, who scores 40 or 50 goals a year. Like, it just doesn't matter the way they play. I have a few numbers I'll read for both series here, just a bit of a preview.
Sure.
Head-to-head this season, Carolina took 2 games to 1, so 2-1-0 for Carolina head-to-head. In terms of points percentage, Carolina finished 2nd in the NHL, and Florida finished 18th and made the playoffs, which, by the way, that's now 2 teams who have finished in 18th in the NHL who have beat the Leafs in the playoffs. Can you guess the other one? Here's a little trivia.
The Montreal Canadiens.
Obviously,
yeah.
Right? I think I said that a million times when that happened. They shouldn't have even been in the playoffs, but I digress. In terms of goals for per game, Florida's offense was a tank all year long, so they took it. They were 6th in the NHL. Carolina was 15th. Goals against per game, though, and this is all regular season, by the way. I think that was pretty clear, but wanted to clarify. Goals against per game, Carolina was 2nd in the NHL, and Florida was 21st. So Florida is very much a high-event team. A lot happens, good and bad, when they play, and that was evident in the series against the Maple Leafs. Like, chances were just insane. And actually, not to make this about the Leafs, but Sheldon Keefe said in his press conference that the guys were kind of, like, his players were kind of surprised at how open the series began through the first 2 games. They were shocked to be getting the types of chances they did against Florida because they didn't get any of those against Tampa.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, the problem was they just couldn't bury.
No.
Power play this year, Florida was 10th in the NHL and Carolina was 20th. I guess because they don't have those stars, that firepower, that kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. But penalty killing, which really comes down to coaching and systems, which Carolina is really good at. They were 2nd in the NHL, and Florida's PK was 23rd. So there's some numbers.
Okay.
I think the favorite in this series is Carolina, and that's, again, who I'm picking in 7. I think for Carolina to win this series, you have to do what you did against the Devils in a couple of the games where you're okay with winning 3-2 games or 2-1 games. You get a couple goals and you lock it down defensively.
Yeah.
And you know, the way that this team is coached and how they play their systems, like that's why I'm going with Carolina in 7. I think they're the better team. I don't think Florida has been the best team in either of their series, but they have found ways to win, and I think because of that, they're kind of riding this emotional high. Mm-hmm. So I'm not counting them out by any means, but if I'm just looking at the numbers and putting the, you know, intangible aspects aside, I think Carolina is the better team, and they should win this series. So 7 games.
I agree, and you know, I'm kicking myself, I gotta tell you, man, because when I was thinking of Stanley Cup favorites at the beginning of the season, the first team that popped into my head was the Carolina Hurricanes, but things happen, right? And that you can't predict. You know, Pacioretty and Svechnikov and Teravainen all go down before the postseason. So I said, well, come on. Like, they're not going to be able to make up for the losses of those players. But here they are. I mean, it's 2 resilient groups going at it. One really cool storyline to follow in this one is the 2 head coaches, because Rod Brindamore had Paul Maurice as his head coach in Carolina in 2002. And then, of course, Rod won the Stanley Cup with the Carolina Hurricanes in 2006, the last time that they were there. So there we go.
And Eric Stahl was on that team, who is now playing for the Panthers.
And we're going to see 3 of the 4 Stahl brothers in this series as well. So a lot of great storylines for sure. But yeah, I've got Carolina in 7. I think they have the better blue line out of the 2 teams. And I think they're just a better team. And it looks like Teravainen is close to coming back as well. So at least you're getting one of those 3. But man, the depth that they've had, like guys like Jordan Martinook have been fantastic in this postseason. And other guys too that kind of fly under the radar, just really good depth players like the Stefan Nasons and the McEachrons, and Kotkaniemi has even had flashes in the playoffs. So it's very next man up for this Carolina team as well. I think both teams play so hard. They win puck battles along the walls. It's going to be a tight series, but I'm giving the edge to Carolina. I'm with you.
Yeah, and 7 games because we're not counting out the Cats.
No.
We just think in a 7-game series, the better team will prevail. If Casey was on the pod, like, I'm interested to hear why he has Florida in 6. I think there's an element of, you know, like we talked about, well, these jerks beat my Devils, so screw them. But I think, you know, if I'm thinking about what Casey would say, he might also say that they're beat up after a couple tough series, having to skate a ton, especially against the Devils, both really great skating teams. But and then playing the Islanders in the first round, like, you know, getting beat up physically through that. So I think maybe that's where Casey's coming from. This team is beat up, so I figured I would mention that too. But maybe next episode he'll chime in and give his thoughts on why he has Florida in 6. But yeah, we're both going Carolina in 7. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, and over to the Western Conference Final, the Vegas Golden Knights and the Dallas Stars. I'm going to stick with the Stars, man. I've got them winning this in 7 games over Vegas, even though I think that this is going to be a tight series as well. But I look at the pieces on both teams, and the goaltending, I think, is such a huge factor in this one. Dallas has their guy in Jake Ottinger. With Vegas, it's kind of been all over the place, as we talked about. Is it Brossoit? Is it Hill? Who is it? So
Jonathan Quick.
Yeah, Quick. Like, exactly. No Logan Thompson. You know, who is it? So I got to give the edge to Dallas.
We haven't mentioned that they have 4 NHL goalies. Like, I know Thompson isn't there right now, but like, I don't know what Quick's doing.
Robin Leonard may never play again. There's a 5th one in there. Like, it's crazy, man.
Interesting.
It's a
what
circus.
A team, man. What a team. No other team would do that.
No.
but Vegas.
It's Vegas. Yeah, exactly. But no, I'm going to take Dallas in 7 games. And so this is what I'm hoping. And this is, and I don't know what you have, but this is another big prediction. And I think it would be wild to see potentially we could see the first 3 rounds of the playoffs all finish with Game 7s. How about that?
That would be really great because we know Game 7s draw eyes, and the NHL needs to draw eyes if they want this whole financial situation straightened out.
That's right.
And if they want the cap to jump. So selfishly, yes, I hope we have a Game 7 because that would be fantastic. I'm also going Dallas in 7 games. I think Vegas is a good team, don't get me wrong, and especially with, a healthy Mark Stone and Alex Pietrangelo, who is playing really good hockey despite the fact that he shouldn't have been because he should have been suspended. And then kind of just, in net, whoever's there, they've all been fine. No one's been stealing games, but you mentioned Brossoit, and then he goes down, and then Aiden Hill made that big save on McDavid on the blocker side, in Game 6. So he's been good too. But I just think Dallas is the better team. And going back a bit, I wanted to mention that Jack Eichel is having an incredible playoff.
Yes,
so far.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, roll your eyes for everybody who's only listening and not watching. Harper had the most dramatic eye roll in the history of eye rolls because Jack Eichel is no longer his favorite player. But you have to give the guy credit, man. He has been dynamite in the playoffs.
He has, and just focusing on him for a second, I will say he has taken over games and moments at times in the playoffs, and particularly in that Edmonton series. And there were a couple times where he made really strong plays with his stick to strip McDavid of the puck, and again, just he's been dynamite. So yes, I had a little eye roll there. I know there's some saltiness there, but yes, Jack Eichel is having a really strong playoffs, and hey, this is an opportunity of a lifetime for him for the first time in his career. But I got to go with Dallas.
Yeah, and no offense to a guy like Jack Eichel, but when I think of him or hear his name, I don't exactly envision a player who would be better in the playoffs because, the playoffs and the regular season are different leagues. They're different animals. It's almost not the same game or the same sport. That's how different the two seasons are.
Yes. Playoffs
versus regular season. And sometimes skilled guys like Jack Eichel, they get closed out. They can't get to the net to score, and, they're less effective. And, of course, everybody listening to me is just falling over laughing and pointing at the Maple Leaf Stars because that's a big criticism of them. But he has really elevated his game, and, kudos to him because I didn't know if he had it in him, but he clearly does. All of this being said, I'm still going with Dallas because I think the way that they're built, they're better offensively. They have guys like Roope Hintz, who we haven't even mentioned, and Joe Pavelski, who have both had incredible playoffs so far. Not to mention their best offensive player in Jason Robertson, who has still been a little quiet compared to his standards, so I would look for him to explode.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Robertson. He has definitely been the one star who has kind of struggled, and so I think that I'm looking to him to be the X factor in this series. Obviously, it's the guy in net, and Ottinger, he shut the door on Seattle in that Game 7, so yes, him, but I'm looking at Robertson to be the X factor. If he can get scoring in this series on top of the offense from Hintz, Pavelski, go down the list, I think that, this is going to go really well for Dallas.
And we're only halfway through the playoffs right now. So I remember when we were doing our bracket episode, I mentioned that Jason Robertson was plus 4,000 for the Conn Smythe. I don't know what his odds are right now, but they're probably even better than that because both Pavelski and Hintz have been more important players thus far in the playoffs. So if you're looking for value and if you're betting on a guy, who has done nothing but score at an elite clip since coming into the NHL, maybe put some money down on Jason Robertson to be the playoff MVP if you think Dallas is good enough to get to the finals, which we both do. But before we finish off here, I want to read some stats just like I did for the last series here. So head-to-head between Dallas and Vegas, Dallas was 3-0 this year, and Vegas was 0-1-2. So 2 overtime games. That's interesting.
Yes.
Dallas got both of them, though. Points percentage. Vegas finished 4th in the NHL, and Dallas finished 8th. Goals for per game, goals against per game, power play, and penalty kill are all favoring Dallas in the regular season. So the only thing that Vegas did better than Dallas in the regular season of the stats that I'm talking about here and that I mentioned for last series as well is points percentage. And they finished 4 spots higher in the league. That doesn't matter now.
Nope.
I think Dallas is a better team. The numbers indicate that they are, and I think they'll get it done in 7 games. I'm thinking it's going to go the distance because both of these teams are very capable, and it could just come down to, Jason Robertson maybe being an X factor, like you mentioned. Could come down to, Vegas's goaltending not holding up compared to what it is at the other end, and Jake Ottinger, who, by the way, last series wasn't unbeatable. He wasn't that great, but they still got it done because he had that dog in him in Game 7. So, I think it'll be another close series. I think both of these series will be close, and I know we ripped on it at the start of the show that these 4 teams are non-traditional hockey markets and maybe we'll check out a little bit. But I mean, in terms of the product on the ice, it's still pretty damn good.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah. I'll definitely be watching, and those are my picks.
Yep, perfect. And I know that Case, obviously, he's sticking with Dallas too, and he's picking them in 7. So we might as well stick with the team that got us here, and that was our only correct pick in the second round. So we're sticking with the Dallas Stars. All right, there you go. Yeah. The Eastern Conference Finals and the Western Conference Finals, the Final Four in the Stanley Cup playoffs gets going on Thursday night. So looking forward to that. And thanks for listening to episode 171 with Chad and myself. We will chat with you again next week.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details. And don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at patreon.com/boysinthebooth.